At 6 a.m., the HOA president stormed my porch with sheriff's deputies, waving a demolition order for my hand-built cabin. This suburban dictator thought she could bully a widower into giving up, but she didn't know my property sits on federal forest land. What happened next destroyed her reputation across 3 counties. The mountain air bit at 15 degrees as Linda Cromwell jabbed her manicured finger at court papers, that sharp Karen haircut trembling with false authority. Radio static crackled from patrol cars while the smell of pine resin mixed with wood smoke from my chimney. She'd spent months terrorizing neighbors with bogus violations. Big mistake picking on this retired Air Force logistics officer. I took a slow sip of coffee and pulled out my federal documents. Before you embarrass yourself further, I told her, you might want to see who actually owns this land. Her smirk melted like snow in July. What would you do if your HOA tried to demolish your dream home? Drop your state in the comments. Let's expose where these neighborhood tyrants are running wild. Let me back up. My name's Jake Blackwood, and 3 years ago I lost my wife Sarah to cancer. We'd always dreamed of building a cabin in the Colorado mountains where her grandfather once took us hiking. After the funeral, I couldn't bear our suburban house filled with ghosts, so I made that dream real. I inherited 2 acres from my own grandfather, remote, beautiful land at 500 feet, surrounded by towering pines and complete silence. The kind of place where you can hear your thoughts without some neighbor's leaf blower ruining it. As a retired logistics officer, I follow rules. I spent months getting every permit and survey approved. Then I built that cabin myself, board by board, nail by nail. Grief therapy turned into a home. 1,200 square feet, metal roof, solar panels, a composting toilet system that would impress any environmental engineer. My German Shepherd mix, Ranger, and I lived quietly, splitting wood, reading by the fire, healing, until Linda Cromwell arrived like a suburban plague in designer boots. She moved up from Denver 18 months ago, driving a spotless white Escalade with Realtor vanity plates. The kind of person who Windexes her car daily and thinks anything built before 2010 should be bulldozed. Within weeks, she muscled her way onto the HOA board and began improving community standards. This woman measured grass height with a ruler and photographed trash cans left out an hour too long like she was documenting war crimes. You'd smell her perfume before you saw her, strong enough to knock a squirrel off a branch. She'd strut up the stone pathways in stiletto boots, clicking like a metronome of irritation. And she targeted me, said my rustic cabin, hurt property values. Never mind that my nearest neighbor lived 3 football fields away through dense forest. She'd show up unannounced with a clipboard, snapping photos of my firewood pile, my solar panels, even Ranger's water bowl. The first confrontation came on a crisp October morning. Aspen leaves crunched underfoot. Wood smoke drifted through the valley. She marched up wearing a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my truck. "Mr. Blackwood, your structure violates multiple HOA standards," she announced, snapping pictures like she'd uncovered a crime scene. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "I never signed any HOA documents. This property's been in my family since 1987. Her laugh could have stripped paint. "All properties in this subdivision are subject to the association. You'll need to pay review fees, $500 minimum, and remove unapproved features like those rain barrels." That night, I spread my grandfather's old property deed across the kitchen table. The yellowed paper smelled faintly of smoke and thyme. According to Linda's boundary maps, my land sat 50 feet farther south than my grandfather's survey markers. Something didn't add up. The next morning, I called the county recorder's office. Bob, the clerk, an older man with thick glasses and the calm of someone who'd seen everything, confirmed it. "There's been a mapping discrepancy on your plot for years, son. Nobody's looked too closely till now." Quote. That conversation planted the seed that would grow into Linda's downfall. 2 weeks later, she turned up the heat. I received a thick certified letter demanding a $500 architectural review fee, plus $50 daily fines until my cabin met community standards. She'd included glossy photos of my solar panels, composting toilet, and rain system like they were evidence of a federal crime. She even photographed Ranger's doghouse. But Linda made her first big mistake. She'd copied the county building department and sheriff's office, trying to get official backing for her crusade. Time for my counterpunch. That afternoon, I drove down the winding, snowy road to the county office, a dull beige building that smelled of burnt coffee and paper dust. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "Bob," I said, handing him the HOA's letter, "I need copies of every permit and inspection record." He read it, chuckling. "Son, this lady's got about as much authority over county-approved structures as my neighbor's cat has over NASA." Bob pulled my file. Every document stamped, signed, and squeaky clean. "You're solid," he said. That was the moment I realized Linda wasn't just bossy. She was reckless. In Colorado, HOAs must follow strict legal steps to fine residents, and hers hadn't followed any. Worse, their corporate registration had expired 6 months ago. According to the state database, the HOA didn't even legally exist. So I mailed her my response, copies of all my permits, the county approval letter, and proof of her defunct registration. Her reaction came fast. She sent more threats, more fines, and then filed a noise complaint about my generator with the sheriff's department. Deputy Martinez showed up one cold Thursday evening. His cruiser headlights swept across the snow as Ranger barked once and fell silent. Martinez looked apologetic. "Mr. Blackwood, I got a noise complaint. Lady says your generator's disturbing the neighborhood." I gestured at the quiet forest around us. "Deputy, my nearest neighbor's 300 yards away. Want to walk over and ask if he can hear anything?" Quote. He smirked. "Honestly, sir, this seems like a civil matter." "Want to see something interesting?" I said, showing him the inactive HOA record on my phone. His eyebrows shot up. "Ma'am's been calling a lot lately," he admitted. "We're starting to notice a pattern." That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. Linda had been harassing other neighbors too. The elderly widow down the road, a Vietnam vet named Roy Patterson. I began documenting everything: photos, emails, timestamps. Years of military discipline kicked in. Linda was digging herself a hole, and I was going to hand her the shovel. When she scheduled a community safety meeting to discuss my non-compliant structure, inviting the county inspector under false pretenses, I showed up prepared. The community center smelled of floor cleaner and melting snow. Fluorescent lights buzzed. Folding chairs scraped as neighbors filed in, bundled in coats and suspicion. Linda stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Maintaining Community Standards in Mountain Living." It would become the meeting that started her undoing. The fluorescent lights in the community center buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Folding chairs scraped against the linoleum as neighbors shuffled in, stamping snow from their boots. The air smelled faintly of wet wool, burnt coffee, and tension. Linda stood at the front like a prosecutor ready to deliver her closing argument. A projector hummed behind her, displaying blown-up photos of my cabin, every angle, every inch of my roof, even a close-up of Ranger's water bowl. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, clicking a laser pointer like she was directing traffic. "We're here tonight to address a serious threat to our property values and community safety." Her voice dripped with fake authority, each word practiced like a performance. Behind her, the screen flashed bold red words. Violation. Unsafe. Non-compliant. The county inspector, Williams, sat near the front, looking more confused than concerned. He raised his hand. "Ma'am, I was told there were immediate safety violations requiring emergency inspection. What exactly am I looking at?" Linda hesitated, her lips tightening. "There are concerns about structural integrity and sanitation issues," she said quickly. I stood, the thick manila folder in my hands, feeling like a shield forged from truth. "Inspector Williams, would you like to see documentation showing my structure exceeds every county code?" Gasps rippled through the crowd as I walked forward. I handed him my papers, official permits, stamped inspection reports, approval letters, all signed and dated. He flipped through each one carefully, his brow furrowing. After a few moments, he looked up. "Mr. Blackwood, your cabin doesn't just meet code, it's an example of how off-grid construction should be done. Solar backup systems, proper sanitation, ventilation, you could teach a class on compliance." The room went dead silent except for the hum of the heater. Linda's face paled. I turned toward the crowd. You've been told I'm some lawless troublemaker. But every inch of my home is legal. What isn't legal is a so-called HOA trying to enforce rules when their corporate registration expired 6 months ago. Quote, murmurs spread like wildfire through the room. People glanced at each other, whispering. Some of Linda's biggest supporters suddenly looked very interested in the floor tiles. Lies, Linda snapped. Our registration is active. You're spreading misinformation to avoid accountability. Really? I said, pulling out a printed copy of the State Business Registry. Inactive. Bold red letters. Dated 8 months ago. Would you like me to show everyone? Her jaw tightened, but I wasn't done. There's something else, I said. Over the past year, this woman has filed fraudulent complaints against multiple residents. Mrs. Patterson, the Johnsons, the Hendersons. Every time she harasses someone, they end up selling. And guess whose real estate company handles the sale? All eyes swung toward Linda. That's not true, she shouted, but the quiver in her voice betrayed her. Roy Patterson, my Vietnam vet neighbor, stood from the back of the room. His gruff voice carried across the hall. She fined my wife for bird feeders, he said. Said they attracted undesirable wildlife. Then she offered to list our house if we didn't like it. A chorus of voices followed, neighbors sharing similar stories. Fines for fence heights, threats over sheds, letters about paint colors no one had approved. The room buzzed with anger. Linda slammed her clipboard down. This meeting is over, she barked, but no one moved. The county inspector cleared his throat. Ma'am, based on what I've heard, I'll be reporting these irregularities to the county attorney's office. And I suggest you stop sending my department false claims. Linda's cheeks flushed crimson. Her confidence cracked like ice under bootsteps. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, high heels clicking against the tile like a retreat drumbeat. That night, as I drove home through the falling snow, the mountain air felt sharper, cleaner. Ranger wagged his tail beside me as if he understood that the tide had turned, but Linda wasn't done. The next morning, I found a thick envelope on my porch. Inside, an emergency demolition order, complete with her forged signature of county approval. The paper smelled faintly of her expensive perfume, like she'd stamped her ego right onto it. An hour later, 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up. Deputies Martinez and Thompson stepped out, their breath fogging in the frigid air. Mr. Blackwood, Martinez said, looking uncomfortable. We've been asked to supervise a demolition under HOA safety provisions. I handed him the fake order. Gentlemen, this isn't a court order. It's a private demand letter written by a woman pretending she runs the county. Thompson flipped through the pages, frowning. Ma'am told us this was judge-approved. Then maybe you should check with the county, I said calmly, pulling out my own folder. Because these are my permits, signed by every legal authority that matters. Linda appeared moments later, stomping through the snow in a long white coat and fury in her eyes. This cabin is unsafe and unsanitary, she shouted, waving her arms. He's been uncooperative for months. Martinez sighed. Ma'am, you'll need evidence of actual violations. Linda pointed at me. He's unstable. His wife died and now he's living like some crazy hermit. He needs to be removed for his own safety. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in that instant. Even the wind went quiet. Martinez's jaw tightened. Ma'am, he said slowly, you're crossing a line. I stayed calm. Deputies, I said, I think you should know this HOA has no active registration and no jurisdiction. You're standing on private land, the county confirmed is fully compliant. Thompson looked at me, then at Linda, then back at Martinez. We're done here, he said, stepping away. Linda's face twisted in disbelief. You can't just ignore my authority. Ma'am, Martinez replied, you don't have any. The cruisers pulled away, leaving Linda standing in the snow, her designer boots sinking into slush. She glared at me as I took a long sip of coffee, steam curling up between us. You know, Linda, I said, I've been researching something interesting about property boundaries. Turns out there are old survey markers up here that might surprise you." Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of markers?" Quote, "The kind that make federal agencies very interested when private citizens start pretending to own land they don't." For the first time, I saw fear in her expression. That night, under a full winter moon, I strapped on my snowshoes, whistled for Ranger, and hiked deep into the forest behind my cabin. The air was silent except for the crunch of snow beneath my boots. Frost glittered on the pines like stars fallen to earth. After half a mile, I found it, the old iron marker my grandfather once showed me, half buried beneath ice and stamped U.S. Forest Service, 1923. I pulled out my phone, cross-checked the coordinates, and froze. My cabin wasn't just on private land. It sat entirely within the boundaries of Arapahoe National Forest. And that meant every single thing Linda had done, every threat, every fine, every so-called legal order, wasn't just invalid. It was a federal offense. I stood there in the cold, breath fogging in the air, realizing the truth. Linda Cromwell hadn't picked a fight with her neighbor. She'd picked a fight with the United States government. When I got back to the cabin that night, the fire had burned low, filling the air with that warm, comforting mix of pine smoke and ash. Ranger curled by the door, his ears twitching to every creak of the old timbers. I sat at my table, that iron federal marker photo glowing on my phone screen. A single thought kept circling my mind like a hawk over the treetops. Linda hadn't just broken HOA rules, she'd crossed into federal territory. I spent Christmas morning the way most folks spend it, with a cup of black coffee, a notebook, and the phone number for the U.S. Forest Service. After a long hold, a calm woman named Angela picked up. When I explained that my land, complete with a government survey marker, appeared to lie entirely within federal forest boundaries, she went quiet for a moment. "Mr. Blackwood," she finally said, "if your documents are accurate, then no local HOA or municipality has any jurisdiction there. We'll open an expedited survey." For the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. "Thank you, ma'am," I said. "I think you just made my year." Quote, Angela chuckled softly. "Sounds like someone's about to learn the difference between a homeowners association and the United States government." Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared like I was going into battle. Years of military logistics training kicked in. I organized every document, email, photo, and letter into labeled binders. Each one was evidence of Linda's harassment campaign, her fake fines, her forged demolition order, and the false claims she'd copied to the sheriff's office. Then came the reinforcements. Roy Patterson, my veteran neighbor, offered witness statements and stories from others who'd been bullied. The local newspaper reporter Katie Martinez contacted me after hearing rumors of a federal land mix-up. She had that restless energy of someone who smelled a scandal brewing. "If this is true, Jake," she said, "it could be the biggest HOA story in Colorado history." Meanwhile, the Forest Service surveyors trudged through the snow with their tripods and GPS units. Their breath came out in white clouds as they double-checked every line. When the lead surveyor, a bearded man named Holden, finally handed me the results, his expression carried that mix of amusement and disbelief only bureaucrats get when paperwork bites back. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, "your entire property, including your cabin, sits on federal land. It's been part of Arapahoe National Forest since 1923. The HOA has zero authority here. In fact, their filings could qualify as wire fraud." "Wire fraud?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yep," Holden said, sliding his glove back on. "Filing false claims against federal property is a federal crime. The FBI tends to take that kind of thing real seriously." I thanked him and watched their trucks disappear down the snowy road. For the first time in 3 years, since losing Sarah, I felt something powerful stirring inside me again. Not grief, not anger, but purpose. By early January, I'd sent every report, photo, and timestamp to the Forest Service, the county attorney, and Katie's newsroom. Roy helped me file a criminal complaint, and Bob, the county clerk, pulled every fraudulent lien Linda had submitted, Turns out she'd been targeting multiple residents, using her HOA position to harass anyone who didn't match her luxury mountain aesthetic. She was about to learn what happens when you weaponize paperwork against the wrong person. Then, like a final act of desperation, Linda doubled down. She sent another certified letter, this time accusing me of illegal occupation of protected land and threatening to report me to federal authorities if I didn't voluntarily demolish my cabin within 72 hours. I almost laughed. "Be careful what you wish for," I said out loud, holding the letter over the fire until the edges curled into glowing embers. 3 days later, the community center parking lot was full again. Linda had called an emergency safety meeting to discuss my so-called violations. She decorated the place like a courtroom: projection screen, podium, even a man with a video camera in the back. Her supporters whispered like they were attending some historic trial. I arrived in my winter coat, folder in hand, Ranger sitting proudly by my truck. Inside, the room smelled of melted snow and tension. Linda stood tall behind her podium, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her voice firm and performative. "We're here tonight," she began, "to address an ongoing threat to our community. Mr. Blackwood continues to occupy unsafe, non-compliant property." "Excuse me," I interrupted. "You might want to stop there." She blinked, clearly irritated. "Sir, you'll have your chance to respond." "Actually," I said, raising my voice just enough to fill the room, "you won't need my response. You'll need theirs." 2 men in dark coats stepped forward from the back of the room. Their badges caught the fluorescent light: FBI Special Agent Rodriguez and U.S. Forest Service Investigator Williams. The crowd fell silent. "Miss Cromwell," Rodriguez said calmly, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, attempted extortion, and filing false claims against federal property." The color drained from her face. "What? You can't do this. I'm the president of this association." Quote, "Ma'am," the agent replied, slipping handcuffs from his belt, "your association doesn't legally exist, and you've been trying to demolish federal property." The sound of metal cuffs snapping shut echoed through the hall. Someone gasped. Others started clapping. Roy let out a whistle that made even the FBI agent smile. Katie's camera flashed as she caught the moment Linda's suburban empire finally collapsed. Linda sputtered as they led her past me. "You don't understand. I was protecting the neighborhood." I looked her dead in the eye. "You were protecting your commission checks." The crowd erupted in applause. Some people cried. Others shook my hand as if justice had personally stopped by their doorstep. That night, as I stood on my porch, the sky stretched clear and endless above the snow-covered pines. The only sounds were the wind and Ranger's low, contented sighs. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel temporary. It felt earned. The fallout was swift. The HOA dissolved within weeks. Linda's real estate license was revoked. She pled guilty to multiple charges, serving 18 months in federal prison and 5 years probation. Every neighbor she'd bullied got restitution checks for the illegal fines she'd collected. Katie's article went viral, sparking state investigations into other abusive HOAs. Roy threw a community barbecue he called Freedom from HOA Tyranny Day, where neighbors roasted marshmallows and burned old violation notices in a bonfire that glowed like justice itself. As for me, I turned my fight into something bigger: the Mountain Veterans Legal Defense Fund, helping veterans and elderly homeowners stand up to HOA abuse across the country. We host workshops teaching folks how to check land records, verify HOA registrations, and fight back with knowledge instead of fear. Now, when the wind howls through the pines, it carries a different sound: quiet laughter, chainsaws cutting firewood, the clink of mugs at community gatherings. No more threats, no more clipboards, no more fines for bird feeders. Just peace. And every time I walk past that old survey marker glinting under the snow, I nod to it like an old friend. Because that piece of iron reminded me, and everyone else up here, that no bully, no matter how powerful they think they are, stands taller than the truth. The mountain always wins.